Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Keswick Ripple podcast. My name is Jim Lang. I'm the Director of Guest Services here at America's Keswick, and each week we want to bring you a testimony that we hope encourages your heart and life. One of the most dynamic parts of our ministry is that when a man or woman comes to one of our programs and is radically changed by the gospel of Jesus Christ, they are sent back out to their churches, their communities, and their families, and God uses them in a mighty way. And so today I want to introduce you to John. John is an intern here at America's Keswick. He graduated the program, the 4-month program, graduated discipleship, and then stayed on for internship. And he helps out down at the Colony, and he's also in the Colony grad band.
That's right.
And so it's a pleasure to have you here today, John. Thanks for sharing a little bit of your
Pleasure
story.
to be here.
So why don't you start out just by telling us a little bit about your formative years, about growing up, and what life was like.
Okay, I grew up in way North Jersey, New York area. So my early years were definitely rough. Just to give you, without getting too deep, but to paint a little picture, my first sister left when she was 12 years old. She ran away and never came back. My next one was a couple years after that, and then my other sister a couple years after that. So that kind of gives you an idea. And I was the only boy, so I wound up being left behind with my parents, they were actually kind of like hippies, I guess you would say. And there was a lot of stuff going on in my house at a young age. You know, there was a lot of, there was some drugs and things like that, and a lot of things going on. So
how did you end up starting in your addiction?
For me, I think early on, it was definitely an escape. The first time I remember like actively drinking, I was about 11 or 12 years old. Again, there was a lot of turmoil in my house, and even in the neighborhood I lived in. I grew up in Jersey City, in North Bergen area. It was kind of rough, and my first drink, I remember I was about 11, 12 years old, and I'll never forget because I drank so much I passed out the very first time.
Wow.
And
so how did your addiction start to wreak havoc on your life? How did you see that?
Well, that happened relatively quickly. I mean, all throughout, from 12 on, I kept drinking pretty much regularly, smoking marijuana. It started to affect my school. I started to get in trouble in school at a very young age, and then it started to affect jobs, and then it just kept progressing. I wound up in my first rehabilitation program when I was 19 years old. I'd already been arrested by 17. So
what finally brought you here to the Colony of Mercy?
Well, it was just a long journey, but I had acquired a lot of things and a lot of good things in my life. I'd gotten saved when I was like 17 years old, but I still struggled, obviously, on and off pretty severely. I had gotten married. I had a career. I played both music, and I also was successful in the IT industry. I had bought a house, had cars, everything, but then began struggling again with pain management and getting addicted to that, which eventually led to heroin, and I wound up losing literally everything that I loved except my life. So I had to come to the end of myself, honestly, this time around to really be ready to get help.
And how did you hear about the Colony?
Believe it or not, I was in AA at the time, running with a great group of guys, and it was the longest time I'd had sober for a while, and which was honestly probably about 6 months. And my sponsor at the time, I started struggling again, and he's like, "Dude, you got to go to this place called America's Keswick." He said, "Bro, I'm telling you, God's in that place." And the funny thing is, he's not a Christian, but he had been here to a men's fellowship night. Actually, he'll be here tonight, which is kind of funny. But he'd been here to a men's fellowship night, and he felt the presence of God. And he knew that I was a Christian, a struggling Christian. So he was like, "Dude, you gotta go. And he got me in. That was a couple years ago.
All right, so you mentioned that you'd been to other programs before. How has the Colony been different from the other programs you've been to?
Yeah, that's a big one. I've been to secular and both Christian programs, and like I said, they offer what they offer, and I'm not trying to like knock other programs, but there definitely was a difference here. As soon as I got here, I pretty much noticed it. One of the first things I noticed when I got here was I felt like I was in like a family. Not so much like I was in a program. In other programs, they have like, sometimes it's like the hospital almost, like institutional kind of environment. This place was definitely different in that regard. And I noticed it pretty much as soon as I walked through the door. But then what I noticed on a deeper level was more so that it was more of a grace-filled environment. not just with the curriculum, but the way that the staff would interact, and the curriculum as well, the things that we were taught. So definitely like I said, the family-centered environment, grace-filled, and they also offer a lot more things that a lot of places, in my experience, have not.
Speaking of which, you stayed for the optional discipleship program, and in that program, you're able to enroll in another optional area called trauma counseling. So why don't you tell us a little bit about trauma counseling and how God's used that in your life?
It's hard to tell you a little bit about trauma counseling. This is what God has used to totally, radically transform my life. And I didn't see it coming. I never even thought about doing something like that. I had done, regular counseling in the past. I had never heard of a model quite like this. And when I got here, I was talking about some stuff in a group that I was in, and my group leader, Pastor Noah Lang, was like, we offer this thing if you're interested, maybe. And I started to think about it, and it was like no pressure, and it made me really start thinking about it because what he was saying seemed to really relate to me, and it began to explain some things. Because my story is constant relapse, getting better and stop using, and then 6 months later relapse, and I could never understand why. For 25 years, I keep doing this. So in trauma counseling, I was able to go deeper into the why, into the why of it. Certain things that had happened, things that I had done, things that had happened to me. And then I began to understand certain beliefs I had been taken on about myself, about God, about life, about people, pretty much lies that I had believed as a result of experiences that I had had. Through trauma counseling, I was then able to uncover that and then take the truth of the Word of God, right? And we call it removing the rocks in the soil. I was able to take the truth, displace the lie, and let the truth take root and then begin to transform my life, which is what Romans 12:1-2 talks about. And the beauty of it, for me, for the first time ever, I could actually see the Word of God now taking root in my life, and I'm changing. Even my son said the other day when somebody asked him, how your dad's doing, his response at this table with a bunch of people, this kid hated me 2 years ago. His response was, he's a completely different person. I don't even recognize him,
And so, more often than not, someone out there watching today is struggling with drugs and alcohol. What would you say to them this afternoon?
Just say no. No, sorry. Wow. For me, like I said, I had to come to the end of myself. I would just say, it's hard to say one thing, I feel but I would say, just don't give up. There is hope. There is help. Just don't give up. Just keep going.
Well, thank you, John, for spending some time with us, sharing your story. And we hope that John's story has been an encouragement to your heart and life. It has been. We want you to share it, like it on Facebook, and we will see you next week. Have a great day.